Right. Absolutely. Great point, describing it as this transition that's taking place. And you also made a great point in calling it providential. And that's the point that I'm going to try to make here, is that it seems like Israel said, we want a king, and then God said, okay, we'll give him a king, and we'll adapt, or we'll change. But we're going to connect some passages here, and we're going to realize this was always God's plan. There is a transition taking place here, but God knew that that transition would take place, and it was always part of his plan. Oh, absolutely. And as usual, if people have questions, comments, raise your hand. That was exactly what I'm looking for, is for people to interrupt me and for us to have that discussion and that clarification. I love the back and forth, so that was perfect. When you look at 1 Samuel chapter 9, just before we move away from this passage, something else I wanted to point out is God's control in the situation. 1 Samuel chapter 9, look at verse 15. It says, "Now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear the day before Saul came, saying, 'Tomorrow at about this time I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him commander over my people Israel, that he may save my people from the hand of the Philistines. For I have looked upon my people, because their cry has come to me.' So when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said to him, 'There he is, the man of whom I spoke to you. This one shall reign over my people.'" And I wanted to read that passage from 1 Samuel chapter 9 again to show that although it is the Israelites who are saying, we want a king, make us like the other nations, and it seems like it's their idea, God is still in complete control of the situation. He tells Samuel, we're going to heed the voice of the people. Then he tells Samuel, I'm going to show you which one it is that's going to reign as king over them. And God is the one who chooses Saul for this purpose. Now, you also made a great point where you showed the imperfections of the people really throughout time. When they're following Moses as a prophet, the people sin, and there's that back and forth between them and God. When they have judges, there are times when they follow the judges, there are times when they don't follow the judges, and again, there's that back and forth. Then we get into this era of the kings. Is Saul a perfect king? He starts well. He serves a purpose, but then he goes astray. And so again, through the era of the kings, we're going to see the imperfections of the people in the kingdom. But it's all leading to something, it's all pointing to something, and God has planned for all of this. Let's turn backwards a little bit, proving again that God has planned for this. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 17. Deuteronomy chapter 17. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, this comes in a section where certain commands, certain aspects of the law are being delivered to the people. And so God would speak to Moses, and Moses would speak to the people. These were their rules. These were the commands. This is how they live. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, in verse 14, it says, "When you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and possess it and dwell in it," and so this is speaking of the future, and it's far in the future at this point. "When you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and possess it and dwell in it, and you say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me." And so years, generations previously, God foretold when you go into the land to possess it, you're going to say, I want a king to rule over me. God knew that, and God planned for it. The following verse, verse 15, it says, "You shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses. One from among your brethren you shall set as king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you, who is not your brother." And so it shows two things in Deuteronomy chapter 17. It shows first that God already knew that they were going to ask for a king, and he planned for it. And it also reminds us that he's still in control. He said, I will choose a king from among you. And then he gives rules for the king. Verse 16, "He shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself." They don't even have a king at this point. Years would pass before they set a king. And he already is giving them rules for the king because he's planned for it. Now also, in the world today, I think we see a king or a queen who rules over a nation. They don't have ultimate power, or they don't usually have ultimate power the way that we see in ancient times. That there are other people in positions of power who are advisors, counselors, who are working with them, that they run a country together. But back then, kings could make rules. Kings could make commands. They could set the tone. They could tell people what to do. Who made the rules in Egypt? The pharaohs did. We see evidence of that in the scripture. Who made the rules in Babylon? The kings, right? The kings that we see in scriptures, they were making rules in Babylon. We're going to turn to Daniel chapter 2 this evening if we have time. We're not going there right this second. But in Daniel chapter 3, the king made some rules with regards to a statue and with regards to a time when people were to fall down and worship that statue. He made those laws, put that in place. The king is the one who makes the rules. But God says, I'm going to let you have a king, and I'm going to make the rules. God is still in control of this. And so even though in Deuteronomy he's acknowledging you're going to have a king, he says, I'm going to choose who it is, and I'm going to make the rules for the king, and I'm going to make the rules for the kingdom. Go ahead.
I think it's important to point out that in this Deuteronomy passage, he's actually describing King Solomon, and he's the outlaw.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's like mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Because it's like he's really describing, I think if you know your history on that, literally what was going to set to occur, and I think it's important.
Right. Yeah, it shows the knowledge and the wisdom of God. Again, that generations before that would even take place, he warned these should be the rules for the king. And really, these rules are put in place so that the king relies on God. He tells them, I don't want you to multiply horses. And in the ancient world, horses were a weapon of war. If you had a cavalry, well, that made you powerful. If you had horses, that made you powerful. And there are multiple places in Scripture we see God telling them, you don't need horses, you have me. And so he's saying, you don't need to multiply horses, rely on me. He also makes these statements about the distraction of having multiple wives, and we see that as a great part of Solomon's struggle. Or the distraction of amassing wealth for yourself. Again, putting your trust in those riches, and God saying you should be putting your trust in me. So he gives these warnings, this wisdom for how a king should behave, and then we see Solomon breaking those rules. Absolutely.
David is in the horses and counting people, so I mean, I think it just speaks to all of that.
Yeah, it really does. Absolutely. From Deuteronomy, I'd also like to go back even further, because I think even before this, we see that God had a plan and that God was planning for the kingdom. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 17. Last week, as we were talking about the covenant, we spent a great deal of time in Genesis looking at some passages dealing with Abraham. First he was called Abram, and then he was called Abraham. And we're going to look again at that transition that takes place where his name changes in Genesis chapter 17. This time, focusing on the subject of kingdom. We looked at these promises. We looked at what God was telling him concerning the covenant. In Genesis chapter 17, look at verse 5. The Lord said, no longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. And we've seen these sort of things repeated with the promises previously, that he would be the father of many nations, that there would be these great descendants from him, as numerous as the stars, as the sand. But then in verse 6 he goes into saying, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. From the time that he's making promises to Abraham, he's already saying